Hey, can you hear me? Hi. So, good evening, everyone. I want to thank my opponent to take on the debate. Thanks to the Collide community for hosting the tournament and everybody watching this debate live. For a public disclaimer, I want to say that I never used illegal drugs, nor I condone the use of illegal substances. With that being said, for the sake of the debate, I will be advocating in favor of the legalization of all drugs. With this in mind, what legalization means is that it will be permissible to carry, use, and sell drugs free from police interference. Obviously, with legalization comes the issue of decriminalization, in which possession, distribution, and use will also become illegal. Now, illegal does not mean uncontrolled. Also, we need to agree on what are drugs, and to simply, without naming certain types of drugs, I will refer to all drugs as defined under the 5 schedule of the DEA into just one class, drugs. For this topic, I will argue that it will benefit greatly our nation to legalize all drugs, mainly for 3 reasons: economics, public health, and public safety. In matter of economics, I will prove that our country and the government standpoint could benefit from the legalization of all drugs through taxation, in the same concept done with alcohol and tobacco, as well as substantial savings of taxpayer money, since the inmate population currently housed in county jails or state prisons will dramatically decrease. In the public health domain, I will prove that it will benefit all individuals legally entitled to have access to drugs by allowing them to use of a better and safer grade of drugs, as those will be manufactured, tested, and approved under lab conditions, rendering their dosage and strength safer for the user. For the public safety question, I will also prove that the legalization of all drugs will be beneficial to the safety of the general public, as criminal activities related to drugs will substantially decline by eliminating gang-related activities tied to the illegal drug trafficking and criminal activities tied to drug cartels, as they will lose their monopoly and territorial fuse.
Anne Reid once said, "Drug addiction is the attempt to obliterate one's consciousness, the quest for a deliberately induced insanity. As such, it is so obscene and evil that any doubt about the moral character of its practitioners is itself an obscenity. Because I agree with this statement, I negate resolve, all drugs should be legalized." Oxford Dictionary defines should as indicating a desirable state. Thus, you should vote for the side whichever gives you the more desirable outcome. I also add the burden that because the resolved encompasses all drugs, if there is even one drug that puts doubt in the audience's mind, they ought to vote con. So now let's talk about the 3 main points of contention I'll talk about today. The first is that the first time can kill you. According to the Recovery Village, heroin is a powerful opiate that has led many users to dependency and addiction. Though it's unlikely that you develop a full-blown addiction to heroin the first time you use it, the introductory experience can be the start of a compulsive cycle that quickly leads to addiction. The Center for Abuse and Substance Research is clear on that point. The organization states that in the case of crack cocaine, the user can become addicted after the first use. What I'll argue today is that with the legalization of drugs, we take away the deterrent that stops many of the youth and young adults that would take drugs. Because it's so dangerous that the first time can cause significant harm, I would argue that the legalization itself becomes dangerous. The second contention I'll talk about is the cost would cause problems. Research uniformly reveals that under legalization, the price of drugs would fall substantially, thereby increasing consumption. Any taxes gained on legal drugs would be quickly offset by the social costs resulting from the increased use. Witness how today's society receives about $1 in alcohol and tobacco tax revenue for every $10 they lose on social costs because of the programs that we have to have in place of it. Increased drug use means increased costs, including those borne by American businesses as they deal with a high workforce, greater absenteeism, and less productivity. The third contention I'll be arguing today is that our drug enforcement is working right now. According to Michael Hogue of the Dallas Report, the past 30 years of the illicit drug prohibition in the United States has been tremendously successful on that front. cocaine use and abuse have dropped more than 45%, and a 75% reduction in cocaine production capacity has been achieved through strategic partnerships and the commitment of political will with the government of Colombia. These successes were born of comprehensive, multidisciplinary drug policy that includes enforcement, treatment, education, and global partnerships. Throughout today's debate, I will not only show why legalization would be bad, but also show why there are more effective practices to aid to the pros arguments of economic and public safety and public health.
Well, I'm really glad that my opponent is deciding to talk about addiction and also the point of cost effectiveness or ineffectiveness, as well as the involvement of the drug enforcement, because those are the 3 points that I'll also prove to the audience tonight that is one of the main reasons why all drugs should be legalized. First off, in condition of addiction, it's not because something such as a drug becomes legal, then the risk of addiction goes away. All tobacco can lead to addiction, but it is legal to consume tobacco. All type of alcohol can lead to addiction. Once again, it is legal to consume alcohol. And again, those drugs, tobacco and alcohol, are legal but controlled, as in order to consume them, a minimum age is required. That age was set by society standards according to legislature. It can be the same way for all drugs, as there will be a legal determination on what drugs are available at what age and to whom. Now, addiction is a brain disorder characterized by compulsive engagement in rewarding stimuli despite adverse consequences. And not everybody that is exposed to a potential addictive substance, regardless of what that substance is, as my opponent mentioned, heroin or cocaine, automatically becomes an addict. There are other factors in the brain, maybe stemming from genetic predisposition or becoming addicted once exposed to a specific drug. For instance, many people in the world consume huge amount of alcohol without being addicted to it, simply because the brain chemical reactions or genetic predisposition of addiction are not triggered in these people. The amount of revenue generated from taxation on drugs can be used towards further research in the domain of addiction. And that is specifically for the addiction point. Now, if times allow, I have 1 minute left, I can go on with the cost and the failure of the drug enforcement. And to give you like a snippet, for example, for the failure of the drug enforcement, we've been in a war, the war on drugs. And I'm not talking about the rock band, the war on drugs. We were both not even born when the term war on drugs was coined in the 70s. And according to a 2008 study published by Harvard economist Myron, the annual savings on enforcement and incarceration costs for the legalization of drugs will amount to roughly $41 billion, $25 billion being saved among the states, and over $15 billion accrued for the federal government. So I'm going to pass it on to you right now.
All right, so there are two arguments we need to talk about. And the first is addiction, and then the next will be cost, which I think we'll dive into a deeper debate later. So about addiction, you said that, well, tobacco and alcohol are legalized, and there's risk for addiction, but there's several other factors. What I'm here to argue is that while you can get addicted to alcohol and tobacco, the Center for Disease Control says it's far more dangerous that you can get addicted to higher scheduled drugs, per se, heroin, cocaine. Even they've ranked that crack cocaine is the only drug in which you can get addicted the first time. For marijuana, it takes a long time to get addicted, and some people say you can't even get addicted to marijuana. For alcohol, in order to have alcoholism, it's an acquired, or it's over a period of time. But what makes these drugs so dangerous, and the reason why President Obama and his administration didn't want to push for the legalization of drugs, is the deterrent right now is that the reason why some people, I'm not saying all, don't want to try these drugs is because it's illegal. But now we take away that deterrent by legalizing it, and even if it's a minority of people decide to try it, we infuse the risk that they could get addicted to these drugs. A great example, or I'm sorry, it's a tragic example, is Lenny Bias, who was the famous basketball player for the city of Boston. The night he was drafted from the University of Maryland, he had one hit of cocaine, and from that he died. And the city of Boston mourns his loss, And what I'm saying is that the legalization of drugs, there's no way for me to give an accurate number of how many people would be at risk. But the reason for so long we haven't passed any legislation on legalizing drugs is because you allow the opportunity for things like this to happen again. Because the legalization of these stronger drugs as compared to tobacco and alcohol is so much more dangerous. And Lenny Bias is just one of many who tried it the first time and lost their life. The second is the criminal justice argument. And I believe you brought up a number as to how much we could save. But I, on the other hand, believe that it's far more expensive to legalize it. So one of the aspects of cost can be the criminal justice system. So according to the Huffington Post, wouldn't legalization at least decrease the cost of the criminal justice system? Surprisingly, legal drugs, especially alcohol, cause more arrests every year than illegal ones. Legal drugs are more available and therefore more abused. Driving while intoxicated, public drunkenness, and liquor law violations result in over 2.5 million arrests every year. This isn't to say that the current drug policies are not costly to the criminal justice system. They are, but that is precisely why we need smarter enforcement policies and not legalization, which will result in compound costs. Essentially, what the Huffington Post is trying to say is that if you legalize it, there's so many more taboos to the actual system that when we saw it with alcohol, when we saw it with tobacco, it's far more expensive to regulate a legalized economy as compared to the illegal economy right now. So the statistic you brought up, I don't see the.
Okay, so first off, what one believes is not what one can prove. And I will be very skeptical of sources coming from the Huffington Post personally. Now, regarding the legalization, okay, if we try to mention what has been done in Colorado, Washington, and now Nevada, they touched base on legalization already. And just for the state of Colorado, their revenue since 2015, after regulating the use of marijuana, recreational marijuana, is $130 million already. So those are substantial funds that can be very well used towards health and promoting other ways to help out against addiction. Now, in the matter of public health, and we can look also at what Portugal has been done. Okay, Portugal has been legalizing, decriminalizing actually all drugs as well, and I have some data here that I can't read off for the public, and they can make up their mind regarding Portugal that decided to treat possession and use of small quantities of these drugs as a public health issue and not a criminal one. Drug overdose deaths in Portugal are now the second lowest in the European Union. Drug-related HIV infections have plummeted by over 90% since they implemented their program. Drug-related deaths in Portugal are the second lowest in the European Union. Just 3 in a million people die of overdoses there. Okay, we have more than 50,000 deaths related to drug overdose. And that's because of the non-regularization and the non-legalization of those drugs. Another point, the number of adults who have done drugs in the past year has also decreased steadily since 2001. And the percentage of drugs-related offenders in Portuguese prisons fell from 44% to 21% over a course of 10 years. Now, the number of people in drug treatment increased 60% from 1998 to 2011, from 23,000 to more than 38,000 people. I think those numbers speak for themselves in order to justify at least the effort that our government can take to promote the legalization of all drugs.
All right, so the first thing that we're going to discuss is Colorado and Washington, and essentially it's been brought down to a dollar sign. But let's go back to the beginning of my first speech where I said that in this resolution we're looking at the word should. So we're looking at something with the most desirable outcome. So let's look at the other aspect of it, which isn't the monetary. So in Colorado specifically, for the complete 2016 report on the legalization of marijuana in Colorado, visit the Rocky Mountain Intensity Drug Trafficking Institute. According to the report, marijuana deaths increased. Marijuana-related traffic deaths increased by 48%, whereas overall traffic deaths in the same time period only increased 11%. In 2009, marijuana-related traffic deaths involving operators who tested positive for marijuana represented 10% of all traffic fatalities. By 2015, when it had been legalized, it doubled to 22%. Adult past month marijuana use increased 63% in the 2-year average after Colorado legalized recreational marijuana, and Colorado adult past month marijuana use was 104% higher than the national average compared to 51%. The number of hospitalizations according to marijuana quadrupled from 6,305 to almost 24,000. So what we see is that while you are going to be creating tax revenue, which I'm not going to concede, which I will concede, that's unquestionable, you're going to be able to tax the legalized drugs. What happens is that you create a much more unsafe environment. As we saw in Colorado, you saw more traffic deaths, you saw more hospitalizations, and then this goes to the point about what is the most desirable outcome, is legalizing what we really want to do. And so another aspect on the cost issue is the black market. So according to the Wall Street Journal, the reason why we are going to still have a black market and we're still going to have not as much going to the government and still money funneling into these cartels is that there's no guarantee that drug legalization would significantly diminish the underground market. In a legal market where drugs are taxed, the well-established illegal drug trade has no incentive to remain. The drug trade is so profitable that even undercutting the legal tax price market would leave cartels with a handsome profit. Drug legalization would also do nothing to loosen the cartel's grip on other illegal trades such as human trafficking, kidnapping, extortion, and piracy. Essentially, legalizing drugs isn't going to do anything to the backhanded illegal markets because it's still more cost-effective for them to find cheaper ways to get the unsafe drugs, which is crack cocaine, which is far more potent than regular cocaine, into the hands of people who now feel that they're backed by the government to try these, who lost the deterrent from them trying drugs. And now, because of the fact that we've legalized it, there's no real way for us to make sure that the American people are safe, or from a global perspective, the global population as well.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned the drug cartels. This is a very, very big issue that we have in the U.S., at least in the U.S., when we know that 7 Mexican cartels basically controlled all influx of drugs in the U.S. With a complete legalization of all drugs, we will put them out of business. Granted, an underground economy will always remain based on different factors that can include, for instance, people to be reluctant to change and be more trustful of the drugs they obtain from their dealers in disregard of their own safety. And that's where the problem with all the numbers you're throwing out is that there's no control on the product that they receive. Now, if it becomes legalized, then there will be a government oversight on the quality, the amount that ones can have access to, regardless of what drug it is, and people won't take crack cocaine anymore. Okay, to quote one on a famous singer, crack is cheap. They won't be able to do that anymore. There will be no need. If they want cocaine, they will get the good product. Like now with the weed shops that are open, you get a greater quality of weed. You get a safer quality of weed. It hasn't been tainted by any other chemicals that render all the products even more dangerous. And that's why the legalization is highly important, to protect the users, because they are the victims. Okay, so we will take out all the criminal activities related to drugs directly by the legalization. Okay, it will take time to change the mentality of the people on how they can obtain their drugs now. That obviously, but through implementation of incentives that will be left to determine, I believe in the long run, people will choose their safety over profit. And usually the profit is not their own profit. It is the profit of the criminals that are benefiting from the illegal trade. So most of the drugs in the underground market are already, like I said, highly tainted and led to more than 50,000 deaths in the year of 2015.
All right, so the first thing I'll talk about is the idea that when we legalize it, we're going to have government oversight. First, the argument that I said earlier is that According to one of your contentions was cost, I would say that legalization under the criminal justice system would be far more expensive. As we saw with alcohol, we now have 2.5 million arrests every year, and that doubled from the amount, or we can't really look to the prohibition time, but what most historians say is that because of the fact that these markets are legalized, it's far more expensive now. So I would say that even if we have government oversight, we're not preventing a lot of crimes, but instead we're just adding a lot of cost to American taxpayers. But more importantly is the idea that these people are not just going to go and resort to buying all their drugs legally. The people who can't afford the drugs will still buy them on the black market, and this is going to cause even more problems because now we have a government who can't really regulate the illegal activity because it's still legal to buy these drugs, but the people are not going to go and buy them legally. I think that's an absurd argument. The people who can't afford them still are not going to buy them through legal means, and that makes up the majority of the users. So we're still going to have crack cocaine. We're still going to have cheaper strands of the drugs, which is still more dangerous. And then let's talk about this next argument is that we're going to solve for the crimes that are related to drugs. The reason why this won't occur is from a study from the U.S. News and World Report. They said one of the big oppositions to, or one of the big pros to legalization would be that African Americans receive too many sentences for drug-related activity, simply possession, distribution. But what happens is that they said legalization isn't the answer. Prison terms and mandatory minimums can be addressed by statutory charges. For example, the 2010 Fair Sentencing Act ended the racially unfair sentencing disparity between crack and powder cocaine. Without losing the deterrent effect of criminality, there's no reason laws could not require more drug treatment and assistance rebuilding lives and less traditional jail time for illegal drug use. What progressives should focus on is improving the opportunity of Americans born into the bleakest neighborhoods, not advocating for the legalization of drugs, which are a guaranteed opportunity for killers. Essentially, what we see is that there's far more effective alternatives, and in government, we've discussed these. The reason why we're not going directly to legalization is because it isn't solving for all these related crimes. It's just going to increase the amount of opportunities the black market has. But decreasing the amount of mandatory prison sentences is an effective way to go through this, and it's something that's actually being discussed in government. So just saying the blanket statement legalization isn't actually something I would advocate for, but I would say that there are actual alternatives such as reducing mandatory sentences, increasing recovery-based policies, having smart law enforcement and community-based prevention, which is far more effective and targeted rather than the generic legalization.
Hey, I think that's my concluding statement here. That's the last turn. So I'm just not gonna throw out a lot of numbers at the audience and the viewers online. I think they are kind of overwhelmed with all the numbers that we've thrown at them. What I want to stress again, it's my three previous points. Okay, the first one being that war on drugs. Okay, where are we with that war on drugs? It's been 45 years now, and studies have shown that treatment will be more effective and cost-saving than this continuous war on drugs. Through legalization, more than $3 billion a year could be redistributed solely on rehabilitation, treatment, and therapy program, which is very important to me as the matter of public health. Through that, the addict and the problem of addiction and mental health issues related to it can be treated. And those people that fell victim of drugs willingly or unwillingly through circumstances of life can benefit from this amount of money through the public funding. Okay, another one, economically, like I said earlier, we have the federal government can pocket more than $17 billion in revenue, like only on tobacco and alcohol. That's a total of like $27 billion in revenue. We can just like think exponentially from that point on if we legalize all drugs, but with the control again of those. Now, criminally speaking as well, I like your point about like a smart police force, and that's what we're liking, okay? Because they're just executing legislation in place. So that's not on the police force. It's all based on legislature and regulations that they are just executing. And if, as a nation, we come up with a plan to legalize all the drugs and put them, instead of separating in like 5 categories in the DA, schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just one category, they're all drugs, the legislature can come up with like strong, very strong legislation to benefit the population as a whole. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, so in my last speech, I'm going to give the audience 3 main reasons why they can vote con in the debate today. The first idea is this idea on cost. My opponent throws this big number out that, well, if we legalize it, we can create tax revenue. But there are 2 arguments I provided that go uncontested. What I first say is that with alcohol and tobacco, for every $1 we received in revenue, we lost $10 in social costs, whether it be law enforcement, the criminal justice system, and vice versa. So even if we generate money through legalization, I tell you that it gets tenfold worse when we actually legalize it because of the fact that there's far more social costs, and that's been proven with alcohol and tobacco. Furthermore, I explained in the criminal justice system that when alcohol was legalized, we see far more arrests, about 2.5 million a year, because there's so many problems related to DUIs and other such, which would be even worse with stronger scheduled drugs such as crack cocaine, and heroin. The second reason you can vote is because this doesn't just come down to the idea of monetary value. In Colorado, my opponent says that they generated a lot. They generated $130 million. I didn't try to throw out a lot of numbers. I was trying to paint a picture. What we saw in Colorado was a quadruple in the amount of hospitalizations, a double in the amount of traffic-related deaths, and these were innocent people who were affected by the people under the influence of marijuana. And furthermore, we saw a double in the amount of usage in the state. What we see is that this isn't just a monetary debate. It comes down to lives. It comes down to people. And in the case of Colorado, innocent people were being hospitalized, and there were more traffic-related deaths because of legalization. The next reason you can vote for me, which went uncontested in the debate today, is the idea that it's working right now. My third contention from Michael Hogue tells you that because of the regulations we've had against cocaine, we saw a 45% decrease in the amount of use in the last 30 years. And moreover, we saw a 75% reduction in the amount of cocaine production capacity. The argument that I keep trying to bring up is the fact that just because we legalize it doesn't mean the criminal activity goes away. The people who resort to the black market will continue to resort to the black market, and the very few people who decide to go buy these through legal aspects will now be able to buy it for a much higher price. But then that brings me to my last reason, and the reason why we should not legalize drugs is the fact that those people who try it for the first time are at risk of death. The example I brought up in my second speech was Lenny Bias. He tried cocaine for the first time, a basketball hero in the state of Maryland, and he died on his first usage. What we do when we legalize drugs is we take away that deterrent that prevents people from using them, but we don't stop the people who are going to resort to the black market anyway. We create a worse world because the people will use it anyway, and it can't be regulated by the government. So as I said in my first speech, the resolution indicates should. What's a more desirable outcome? And I say that you negate today's resolution for a more desirable outcome. Thank you.